All right, so we're going to start. We're going to start with a bit of a pose puzzle. So the puzzle means that getting your bones centered on the shapes of the props is kind of interesting. So what you'll position is the blanket rolled under the lengthy bolster to the back. So I'm going to sit in front of the bolster. If you have your blocks nearby, you're going to be adding those to this position as well. So the foot of the mat is clear, essential. And then you're actually going to sit up on the edge of your bolster, okay? So with the back of your seat, it's really wedged on the seat is wedged on the edge of the bolster in all respects. And then as I start to position my back on the bolster, I want to check that I've got a blanket on the side. The extra block is in the front. I've got a block behind my bolster. And then I've got my belt as well. Okay, so put your sandbag up into your lap and then feel when you let the zone of your spine lean back that you're working to experience the sand up to your belly now, and feel the knees certainly bending and step the feet outward so that the feet they're parallel but they're in a wide stance. And then as you start to lower your head back to your block behind your bolster, I've positioned my block so it's at a mid-height. Okay, now some of you might find that taking the block all the way down to the low height is perfect. Some people teach this with no block, so it's a bit of a arch in the cervical vertebrae. So I'm going to teach it with a little bit of safety, kind of the elementary variation. And then when you move your sand up across the broadness of the ribs, try to let that sand be placed as even as you can. And yeah, let it be even so it really is wide and there's not too much bulk of the sand right in the center of the bag. So try to spread out the sand. Okay? All right, so now let's take the belt. It is a bit of a puzzle until we get into it. Take a belt and you're going to hold onto your belt. Now I mentioned early on that we have the belt in a loop. Now if your belt's not buckled and sealed into a specific loop, don't worry about that. First things first is that we hold onto the belt and we have a pretty generous width with the belt, and we start to selectively reach our arms back. All right, don't be ambitious. See if you can go slow. Slow with the motion of the hold on the belt and the movement of the elbows out so the armpits widen and you start to feel that sensation of lift at the heart, but a fullness of breath. So my arms are holding on with the strength of my arms onto the belt, so it kind of resurrects the circulation in my arms. It is like that, isn't it? But feel where it brings the blood flow into the muscles. And then let the legs relax the knees together. So the knees are positioned to touch inwards. And that relaxes the lower back. And feel if your feet want to scoot out a little farther so that the knees drop in. There is a slight sensation in the side of the thighs, stretching. And let's emphasize for a few moments the decision that you'll make with all these kind of orders with the hold of the belt and the knees together. Feel what falls away first. You might let go of the belt and then let your arms open and rest on the floor. And kind of recirculate your breath in through the nose. Feel the lift of the chest, feel the manner of response with the sand, and you might end up moving a little higher on the chest so that you get busy with the lung support. I mean, the sand is truly a primary strengthener for our lungs in this position. So training, weight training for the breathing muscles. Okay, now secondary, you might stretch the legs down. So They reach forward down into the feet, trying to press the back of the heel, and that heel band is reaching versus trying to dig it into the floor. It has to dig just to be a heel. But feel the feet trying to spread forwards. And then give yourself permission to let the legs relax for a moment. Yeah, I find my legs, everything kind of pulls downstream a little bit there. And then I reset the block under my head, especially if it tips a little bit. And we'll stay here for about another 45 seconds. Just enough time to notice the good, the challenging parts, and feel an equilibrium with the rib cage. And starting to internalize our focus into this practice. So see if you can let the mind's attention really scan into your body and your breath. Setting this time aside to feel better. Now we bend the knees. It's essential that when the knees bend, the feet slide in. We continue to represent opening the chest, but we have a ways to get into the next pose. So remove your sand, okay? Get a hold of your block under your head, and then as you grab a hold of that, you're gonna lift up your head and then reach the block forwards towards the knees and slide down to the base of the bolster so that you're on the floor, right? Your seat is on the floor right in front of the bolster. And then with the block center of the knees, narrow, feel your arms besides the knees and squeeze the block. See if you can push into, and as you push into it, there's no reason you need to lift up or forward. I want you to try to stay with that squeeze of the block. And then bring your hands behind your head and hold on, interlacing the fingers and trying to move your elbows open. Okay. Now with the feet, relax. The legs, not so relaxed. They're fairly active, assessing where to go. I want you to hold on to the back of your head so that your neck is a little more comfortable and let your head actually push back into your hands. And so it lightly supports the neck. Okay, this is about finding ease, not finding disturbances right through the neck or the spine, trying to feel control in the core. And then you might lift up and forward a couple inches, but stay with where you can monitor that core strength. And then let your arms reach forward and come up to sitting. And then position your blocks besides the legs. So we'll bring our feet together, the knees out. And now, where that belt is back yonder, you're gonna get a hold of your belt. And if it was buckled up in a loop, you're gonna place it overhead. Don't lay back quite yet. Okay, so take a moment here. There's a few pose pieces. So we'll have the belt connected in a loop over the feet and around the front of the ankles. And you want to cinch it up quite intensively so that it actually calms the nervous system, right? You have that pull on the skin, that pressure. So you'll need a blanket and a sandbag here. Okay. So you want to have your blanket behind you. I can toss it back and set it perfectly when I'm on my back. And then your sandbag goes across your feet. Okay. So you've got that rooting for your ankles. Okay, now if the hips feel like they can open up more, you might move the blocks a little farther out below the knees. I start with the blocks fairly high under the thighs. And then when you reach your hands, you're going to take your right hand to the left knee, your left hand back to the bolster, and create that rotation through the spine. Right, spines are meant to rotate sometimes, not just hunch over. So feel the turn, feel that intense grip with your right hand. And then simply switch sides, left hand to right knee, right hand back onto the blanket or bolster. Turn your waist as much as you're feeling that threading of strength in your back muscles. Okay, now come forward, recline back, and reach your blanket so it's, place it carefully under your head to support your neck stretch that's continuing. So there's a little bulk under your head to feel some elevation in the brain stem and the neck base to lengthen. And then reach both hands back and hold your elbows. And as your hands hold your elbows in this crisscross position for the arms, go back to that centering and elongation of the chamber of the body, the mid-chamber. Notice if it's a different sensation in your back in comparison to the first pose. So we kind of move through a pose shuffle most of the time. But when we shuffle into the next one, it is a bit of a mental moment to notice, distinguish the differences in your shoulders. And I would recommend that you work with either holding your elbows or interlace your fingers and stretch your full arms back. Give it a few more moments. If you're an elbow crisscrosser, you're going to change the crossing to the other hand, reaching to the opposite elbow. It's usually the awkward crossing is your second one. If your hands are interlaced, you'll change the interlace as well. That can be particularly confusing, I find, for me. I tend to have one side and I repeat it most of the time. So take a moment to feel the change of the interlace. It's important for your hands. And then let's center our arms open and move the blocks so that they are either tilted for a contour on the side of the leg so that the skin is a little bit more comfortable, or you're going to bring them a little farther out so they're just like the very corner of the block is under that outer band of the knee. So you can still feel your pelvis centered, and it's more of a basin of sensation for the adductors, for the inner thigh, the groins. Now, if this zone feels particularly grippy, let the shoulders center back and use this arch of your spine to create a leeway and hope that the thighs and the hips can start to release. And with that guided breath, inhale slow, maybe eyes relaxed. Exhale, empty the lungs. Kind of take a little bit of a scan in your belly. Feel it moving. Feel the mobility of the abdomen. And just allow yourself to stretch the muscles between the ribs via breath. You know, with the arms not having to do anything too complex in the next pose. So we're finding some moments where the flesh of the shoulders is positioned so you're not rounding your back. And so as I start to transition from this pose to side sage, let's consider doing like a little bit of a mini hip opener on each side, glute hip opening, and then we'll kind of cruise into that side beam. So if you've got the belt buckled near your hip, you can possibly uncinch that, either unbuckle it, unsnap it. If you have a cinch, you can loosen it. And that provides you a little bit more of a path of moving your knees up, and then slide the belt aside and the sand a little bit over to the side. Doesn't have to be perfectly near some leg, but across. And then what we're going to do, actually, let's back up. Go back to where we were a moment ago. Let's bring our left knee this time over to the block, or if you have a ball, you can use that. I want you to keep that knee open, and then you're going to cross the right foot. Try to get it over to the left knee, so it hooks over to the left knee. Now, if that's a little bit of a, oh, I'm going to kind of inch my spine and twist, I want you to really feel your chest puff open. So you're puffing, chest open. Okay, now when I cross the right foot over, it's a bit of a challenge in the hip crease. So hold on to the right knee with your left hand, and then feel that you hold that knee and you create traction through the right hip. So give that a try. If putting your knee over towards the block is too much, and then to put your foot over is really ambitious, you could start with your knee pointing up on the left leg, then cross it over, and then tilt over. This just requires a little bit of hip strength and mobility. So you can kind of play with it like I'm doing here. Just kind of play with the directional strength of my hip, and then when I hook onto the knee, I hold the knee with my left hand. I hook onto the left knee, but I'm holding the right knee. Whatever's closest to my hand and easiest to get. So let's try to let the right arm relax here instead of be ambitious with pushing it back. It'll be overhead very soon. So relax the chest open. Feel if you can create any more interesting motions of arching your spine when you're reclining. Can you feel the ribs serving the breath the best by feeling the openness of the rib cage? I personally feel mostly my right glute, my hip, groins. The chest is sort of a side story. And now holding the knee is pretty essential here to keep the glute stretch. So if it's rather intense or kind of searing in the hip, you might feel an established hold. Lift up at the ribs, let your head turn a little to the right. Breathe. Now remove the grip with your hand, and then when we switch sides, anything in between that seems to serve you the best. So maybe it's the right foot still on the left knee, you kind of go a little side to side to kind of loosen up the hip grasp, especially if it doesn't feel too grippy right here. And then I let the right foot lower and then shift the right knee to the block, and then see if I can get this left leg to cross over to the right knee. Likely you have a different degree of length on each, or ability to be flexible in each hip. So the side that's grippier, when you hold onto the knee that crosses over, you might be farther away from the bolster on the tighter side. So encounter the differences with a little curiosity, and rather than too comparative, be right into the moment here with the hip. Left arm passive, right hand active. Strengthen also within the left hip by pulling and kind of targeting into the glute, into the buttock muscles. And if you can point to where it feels like its sensation is kind of sparked up, it's almost like you turned on the stove and it's sparked right in that corner of the socket here. So the goal is to try to spread that flame, right, and to warm up and loosen the tissues, not just one spot. So what you might do is let the left knee move into the right hand. Push a little forward with the knee. Let your arm relax open. And relax the left foot. Yeah, it's pretty sharp. Things you can follow up with this exact exercise would be rolling on probably a smaller ball, right? The tennis ball would be a good one, right into that socket, and try to spread out the tension so it's not stuck. So as I hold onto the knee for a few more moments, feel the belly relax with the breath. Feel the spine centering. And now as we start to move into opening the shoulder joints, we're going to release the grip with our hand and then let the legs go back to some sort of normal. Some sort of normal. And that wasn't like a normal glute sensation for daily activity, right? It would be when you take the time. So when you uncross, the hip will readjust now. So what we'll do is I think the idea of getting a little bit of core awareness when we stretch the core. So we're going to roll left, okay? And I want you to move the belt away so it's not underneath your hip at all. And then take the blanket on top, push it back, and then turn your bolster across your mat, okay? So you want your bolster so it's a horizontal and the blanket set behind you gets to go completely down. And so the roll at the base is going to be flat. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think you might appreciate a little bit of that. And you'll have some bulk set up here. A bulky blanket stack, okay? So get right towards this, my right inner leg, I could put a block or a ball inside that right leg, not required. Got my sand, and I'm going to set the sand to the side to start. I'm going to kind of prop it up next to my bolster. Okay, so as I move my left arm right between the two prop sets, the bolster and the blankets, and then my body is wedged between that set. Okay. Now, I sometimes like to get a feel of this, the full functionality of this position for my ribs. Maybe before you get sand on, maybe you're sand happy and you can't wait to slap on the sand. But if I feel like my arm can open and go across the wave of the ribs. So opening, let your ribs wave. I don't know, they don't get a lot of waving moments during the day, the full cage. Okay. Free the ribs. Okay. Free range ribs. All right, so if I get my sand on my side, I'm going to put the sand down to my hip for me, but you might like your sand on your ribs. Okay. So we have the reach of the legs. My left knee bending, my right leg is bending as well, but it's stretched back on top of the block. And this is to support what's important here is reaching. So if I reach overhead and feel like, I could use something else, I could get a block, and then I could stay there for a good minute. Okay. So feel if you have the block overhead that it's not too high. This is okay. You know, it does offer some evenness in my ribs, but it's too much in my shoulder joint. So I want to open up my joint and not feel like it's got so much mayhem going on, I can't relax. So I might move my block so it's closer to my blanket, and I can't see anybody as much, but my elbow's softening. My neck is kind of burrowing my head into the blanket so my neck can relax. When you're resting your neck, it's not likely you're trying to hold it up. So try to let your head relax into the blankets. Perfect. Few moments here. Stay with it. Stay with the energy of the side, loosening up. And anytime you generally kind of open your eyes or try to get on alert, usually the neck tightens up. So perhaps letting your eyes relax and then feeling how to get your neck relaxed. It probably has very little to do with your vision ability in looking. It's the opposite. So letting the inner space soften around the neck and the throat. You know, what we're going to work through is this landscape of the spatial landscape here of the ribs, and then especially that comes from our ribs down to our hip sides and then into our low back. So we're going to set up to eventually move into a very supported child's pose coming up here. So let's take our time to kind of navigate how we track to get there. We're going to be body trackers now, kind of track your muscle memory. So as I lower the right hand down, if I got sand packed on my side, that would probably slough off soon enough. And try to make this a little bit organic. How do you turn so that you're facing down to your props? Now the left arm's in the way, so I'm going to slide that back over to the left, and then move your sand aside, and then simple. Turn to face downwards, and let's take our bolster, put it on top of the blankets. This is kind of good. So we'll have our hands on the floor. If you need a blankie under your knee or a towel, this might be required depending on your flooring. So as the fingers are open, we're going to let the toes hook under, and then gravitate towards the rounding back. Cat spine, chin in, and then feel the cat spine for a little longer. Try to let your spine adapt, but also let the neck muscles relax. Let your head nod side to side. Okay, now as you arch your spine, and then you round your spine, we're going to make our way back to our feet. So what I'd like you to practice is a little bit of kind of play. Like how would you get your hands and your spine to fully stretch down? So we're going to move our toes to help lift our knees. And then you can do a blend of walking your hands back and walking your feet forward. And play with the width of the feet so that you can first do a standing child's pose. So our ribs lower down, right? You might feel a little bit of coil and recoiling, but the spine is heavy, okay? The weight of your head, the heaviness of your head is particularly important here to stretch your spine. So let your arms dangle. They could be besides your feet. They could be forward of your feet. You could also hold your elbows with your hands, okay? So feel the hamstrings. Feel your hips sway a little side to side, whether your hands are hanging or your hands are holding. Yeah, it's one or the other. Dangling or holding, and dangling, right together. But the arms and the spine are forward. See if you can experience a still position for a few breaths. Yeah, if you really have the weight of your head down, you can positively stretch the neck. I feel the legs. That's a pretty dominant sensation muscular-wise. You know, as you lower your hands downwards, you got to start to walk forward and a little bit of back, but the going back might be the priority. As I lower down the knees, I'm going to reach both arms forward on the bolster, on top of the bolster, the actual arm flesh, not just the hands. And then you'll reach your hips back and your arms stretching. And try to get your head on the bolster. See if you can get your forehead, just the forehead tip, like right at the hairline. See if you can get that too. Press a little bit into the bolster, and then the arms are reaching and the palms facing in. Yeah, it's a very restorative child version because you have so much under you to hold you up. You know, feel here the spacing of your knees. Now, you might find generically they're a little bit wider than hips distance. Breathe. Okay, now, as you lift up your head, slide your hands down. Let's bring both hands down first, and then as I shift my bolster now across, I'm going to move my hands right in front of the bolster, tuck my fingers under the blankets, and then stretch for a mini moment here to an up dog. So let your hips really tilt into the bolster so you feel that reach. Now, if you want to kind of flatten down, you're a little tired of it, you can always bring your elbows down, okay, and hold on to your elbows with your hands and be here and stretch your core. This is a good way to generically stretch your core. If you're trying to multitask and read something, this is a good setup for stretching the core and supporting the glutes, okay? Because holding it up this way for a long time is a little tiring, okay? So get a few moments here, letting the belly stretch. And then we'll come back to table and we'll find our way into side sage. So our right hip is down and our block is under the left knee perhaps. And as you reach your right side between the blanket and bolsters, the bolster, you're going to work with that reach of the left side. Yeah. Make emphasis here for the extremity to lengthen, right? Potential. Okay, now if I add my sand, I'd place it on the exterior left hip or the waist. Okay, so it could be hip, it could be lengthwise. This is where you really have to find the mild curve of the ribs connecting to the waist, and it's such mystery structure, right, for our daily movement habit. It's not like you spend time really kind of figuring out your sides as much as you would the feet under you, right? So unless we crawled, right? So feel the feature of the side. Take a nice full cat stretch on this one. If your left leg ain't liking this position with the block or any of those items, you could move it aside and you could feel the left leg stretching back, barely on the block or maybe a tad. And then, yeah, you want to feel where the opportunities are here for the waist. And then most essential for me is just to let my head be heavy and not try to push it up. So feel the weight, let gravity have you for once, right? You've got your spine in a good shape. It's not causing the back to get shorter or hunch over. And then the arms are positioned so that maybe your block is overhead under your hand. Breathing slow. Exhaling. Yeah, enjoy your breath. Even if that's what your practice is all about, just getting enough downtime to feel the body breathing and being breathed. And now with this significance of how we're moving in this left side, we're going to piece the puzzle together, feeling in this left side, this left radius through the side, okay? So what I'd like us to do is start to let your sand fall off. sand falafel, okay? And then when you roll your ribs, well, ribs, you know, I don't sense that I feel they roll a lot, but if I'm on my bolster like this, I can roll into them. So use the bolster to push your ribs down into, and then start to come up, and we're gonna move our bolster forward to our feet, pull your blankies, okay? And then take a seat on them. Yeah, just take a seat on your blankets. Easy peasy, okay. So this has some particulars. You'll need a couple blocks, and let's start with the leg position. Okay, I hope you can see me fine. Okay, so I've got my left knee bending, and when I like to catch the back of my thigh, like I'm kind of grabbing the flesh just above the back of my left knee, and then I try to let the left foot draw in on its own accord, right? So instead of kind of pulling it in with my hand and yanking the joint, I'm going to see how it goes in on its own. That's good enough, okay? So, you know, this might be one where some of us need something under the left knee. So if you have one of those balls or a blanket or towel, it might be helpful. You might go okay without it. So you're going to have your sand nearby after. We're going to do that in a moment. Place a couple blocks to the outer and inner side of the right leg, and then your bolster is going to go on top of the blocks, right? So the bolster is on top of the right leg, but the blocks are on their second height so that it doesn't smash your leg, the bolster. That sounds tragic. We wouldn't do something like that. Okay, so the bolster smash. All right, so I've got my sand very high on this left thigh, and then when I lean into my bolster with my right elbow, it's too close to me right now. I can't get enough length. So I'm going to push out the blocks a little bit towards my foot, and then I'm going to try to make it casual. So I lean into my bolster, and I let my right hand hold my head, okay? So we stay with this left side condition. Back to the side, but it's different than side sage, right? It presses into the hip, okay? So feel your left arm reaching over the side of your face. There we go. And feel the waist gradually turn a little bit to your left. It's pretty subtle though. It's almost like you visualize it turning, but it doesn't seem to actually make any incremental movement. So let the weight of the hips really sink down. Yep, the left arm likely gets a little bit drained out, right? It's inverting a bit here. So what you might do is let the left arm reach behind you and rest on your back, and let the pose take a few more moments to process and absorb in the side. The left side is the sensation emphasis, isn't it? I feel the legs. There's certainly a kind of looming energy around my side and into the low back. Luminous, how about that? Luminous energy. Take a few more moments here. If it's something that you like and you want to steep in longer, you can always stay in a shape past the given time. His left hip is starting to feel a little bit of that quality of awareness building. And now as you let your right hand release down, then your slide up to turn forwards, and then take your bolster and simply lift it, let the short end relax on the floor. Let your bolster short end relax. Don't make that bolster work too hard. So we're going to bring the arms so they're on the short end and you're leaning to the bolster. And if this is of interest to you, you could stay with the energy of leaning forward. I think it's nice to kind of iron out what we just did in the back and give some balance to the low back. But if it's pretty challenging right now, stay with it just for a few more seconds. Doesn't necessarily get easier. Okay, now that's a good way to kind of rise up the spine. Think of the position of a forward bend like this with the bolster so that your back can't slouch as much. So we'll come into pigeon with the left hip. Now, if this is something you want to stay with longer and pursue forward folding, you can go here, but you might go with the bolster down. And then you're going to stretch the left knee stays out. I take the sand off. Stretch the right thigh back. Okay? So the two blankets suffices as a bolster height, right? It's just a little more mashed down. So I'm going to take the bolster across the mat and then lean into it with my elbows. Yeah, the hip is opening on that left side. It's fairly intensive, right? So feel your back gently stretch. So let your hands either press together. If you don't like this pattern, you could always push your bolster farther forward. You could turn your bolster and make sure it has enough height. You can lie down with your rib front on the bolster and turn your head to the side. It's pretty challenging to do that though, isn't it? It's pretty full in the hip when you go farther downwards. It's a downward pulling in the hip joint. So find what's realistic for you, either elbows up or across. Sorry, elbows down or across and open on the bolster. Yes, stay with the energy for a few more moments here. Feel the hip. I'm assuming it's not a hip hooray, but a hip parade here. Now emphasize the left knee open. You know, we start with and always have like a opening pose. That's a chest opener usually, and a Baddha Konasana pose, which you might not sense it's a lot of hip work, but it's half of this pose, right? So review that for a moment. Come around to sitting. Bring your feet together, the soles of the feet. Take the bolster up, short end, under hands, and then lean forwards. Yeah, so that inner thigh, groin sensation. Now, if this is not happy on the knees and they are feeling a little bit ticked off about it, what you could do is stretch both legs out. A little bit more knee friendly, isn't it? So you be the decision. You can make the decision of together and out. Some people do both. If you're moving the legs outwards, which I will practice to balance out the sequence, feel that the feet flex, and really important to draw the kneecaps up. Like you're pulling up the quadriceps, kneecaps pulling towards the hip. Strengthen the circulation into the hip joint. Not required to tip forward farther. Keep in mind posture is the most essential. Good poise here. And then move the right foot in. So if you're in Baddha Konasana, you're going to simply kick the left leg out. Those of us wide angle, bring the left or right foot in. And then feel your seat, kind of reset your sitting bones. And then taking your sand over to the right thigh. And your blocks besides the left leg, outside, inside, and the bolster on the top. All right, and then when I tip into it, you can find that the leg makes its own choice. Like if I don't put my left leg a little farther out, you know, I have to kind of try to get it to move open for the lower back. So reach that left elbow to the bolster, okay? Tip into it with your head, and then lift up the right arm and feel that awareness connecting through the arm moving into the ribs opening, right? So that's part of it. The arm moves, the ribs gradually go wider and wider, like it's a waist hail, waist inhale, like your waist is breathing. Even though it feels like it's stuck in your nose. You don't want it to be stuck in your nose. So when you lift up the side, so then you don't have a stuffy nose that way, you let your waist do the breathing. And your right arm could be behind your back, or it could stay overhead, over the side. Yeah, feel when your head turns, feel when you have your head down. You do not have to hold your head. If you prefer to lean down, let your head lower towards the arm. That might be very significant for your waist to feel the stretch. So this right side body sensation is really getting busy. I like to sometimes put my hand on the side that I'm stretching. So put my hand on that side of the waist. So for all of you, it's on your right side. But you put your hand to the lower side of the waist, right up to the pelvic bone, right? And then just let your hand kind of guide that side to stretch that connective tissue. Especially if your thumb reaches to the back. I mean, thumbs are interesting, right? They're definitely a bigger piece of the fingertip that has an ability to move the contour of the bone when you push into it. Unless your thumb hurts, then that doesn't count. So a few more seconds here. Now, when you lower your left arm and you guide your body up to sitting upright, move the bolster forward, tip it up, lean into it. Okay, and I'm going pretty slow, not necessarily trying to push the edge in my back, but sensitive to my back muscles stretching. Let my brain lower down a little bit. Feel the inner thigh stretch. Now this is the prep for pigeon, right? So keep in mind when you lower your bolster and you take your stand off that right leg, it's like the inner thigh is already ready for that. Now if it's too much too soon, you can always bend the left knee and kind of center your sitting bones and then lean to the right and let the left leg stretch back, okay? So if I'm in an upper pigeon pose versus sleeping pigeon, my left, the whole quad starts to stretch. Okay, so try to keep your hip flexor on the back leg feeling some sensation by continuing the top of the back thigh to lower down, especially at the very, very top, which has been indicated, huh? So the knee doesn't need any direction. It drops. There's the top of the thigh. So feeling the right hip, feeling the front of the left thigh. Yeah, the pose shuffle gets interesting in a few moments. Hasn't been as interesting yet. So feel where your legs are in this kind of origami-ish shape. Knee out, leg back. Elbows are centered, or remember, you can have the choice of them on the floor. They could be with the bolster across. You can have the bolster under your belly. Now scan for wherever your pose shape has ended up, like feeling the mid to lower back kind of shelf. Right? Notice if there's some even definition in that part. Not necessarily that it looks even or you have to look at it, but go with feeling. Are you balanced on your arms? Can you balance the breath on the right and the left side, or is that a completely awkward thing to try to strive for? It seems like more efforting than is necessary, huh? Like if you fill a balloon more on one side than the other, I don't think that's something that we can figure out here. So when we move into our backs, let's feel how we press into our right sitting space. And then we come around Okay, now follow me with this one. We're going to move the bolster forwards. Well, it's already in the front anyway, across. And as you uncross the legs, you're going to bring the legs onto the bolster. This probably feels nice to stretch the back of your knees a bit. Move a blanket aside. I think to the right side is ideal. And then a blanket back. And let the back of the legs get a pretty decent, even sensation. So grab your belt. And it's full length, right? No loops here. Okay, pull on the feet. Just get busy with getting the legs close as they'll go. Don't focus on trying to get your legs up to the sky here. My focus is pulling the balls of the feet, so I'm below the toes, right? Closest to arch. And then I'm just gonna get busy with pulling forwards and really stretching the back of the legs. So feel this back stretch, the legs and the back. Okay, now take the belt off your feet and then move on to your back. Have your blocks nearby. And let's bring our spine down and our belt under our feet and bring our legs up here. Okay, so same, right? But legs are up. Back is happier for certain, right? Back is like, thank goodness we have a floor here for us, for our back. So feel when the feet are together, feel when they're apart, about hips distance, as long as your feet don't get so tired here by pushing. I want you to start to take away the energy of, I've got to push with my feet, and pull with your arms. See if you can twinkle your toes so you're not causing as much energy through your feet. Pull with your arms. Let your back gently release. It's really super balanced for my back. Now, if your feet are together and you like that better, that's perfect. So feel both and then end up with the last few moments, feet apart or feet together, whichever you prefer. Personal choice. Pose of choice. Okay, now important, we're going to slide the hands down so my elbows are on the floor, and maybe yours are too. So I've got a little slack in the belt, but I'm going to move my feet forward so they're not 90 degrees, but they're going towards 60. So now my elbows are coming off the floor, so I'm going to slide my hands down the belt, try to keep them on the floor. Stay with this so your core strengthens. It's kind of a simple instruction. Try to let the legs go forward, but feel your elbows getting as close to the floor and the arms to the sides of your body as you can. And the flight risk here is a little bit, right? With my feet push, my spine tends to arch. So I want you to be a little careful of your spine and breathe at the belly. Okay, now without forcing the legs to go straight up, we're going to bend the knees and try to feel the feet move forward and down as if the goal is that they're going towards the bolster. So just forward and down so they're at a right angle. Hold on tight, okay? Now seal the spine so the spine gets flatter. You're going to pull the knees in and then remove the belt. It probably removes itself. And take a block and place it between the knees and center your feet on the bolster, okay? Recenter your arms. So my arms are by my sides, yep. My block is center of the knees, and as I press down into my feet, I want to start to lift the hips up and stretch the arms overhead. Okay, blanket doesn't have to be under your head if it's causing too much pressure in the neck, but it might feel good too. So lower down the spine as well as your arms forward and down. And let's take this several times at our own pace. I would avoid stopping, right? You want to keep in motion. Even if the motion down, you feel like, oh, I just want to stay and put my eye pillow on now. We'll see if you can continue a little bit. Keep momentum, otherwise it gets pretty sleepy. So keep a little momentum going. Spine lowers down. You're at that final stretch anyway, right? You got a little more energy. So feel the hips lift and lower. Okay, and we're gonna get upside down. We're gonna have 2 different inverted tracks in the next 20 minutes. So the final phase here. So I want you to bring your sense of your, the pressure into the block. So really squeeze into the block. The feet are on the bolster. We're not trying to adjust your hips up right now. Okay. Now remove the block. These might squeeze in and shake a little bit, but you're going to push down into your feet and then slide the block in its low to mid height. Now, if your back right now feels at the lower chamber of your back is a little tight, I would say low block. Some moments it just feels like, wow, I have a little more tension than I want right there. So you can go low height. If you decide, no, I like the legs up with a little more height, put the block so it's at the mid height, but realize that could be a little more challenging in your low back when you get out. It's not going to feel bad right now, but it's the after effect. Okay, so decide on your block height, and then when you put your hands on the floor besides you, down below, forward and down, you're going to bring your knee up one at a time and try to go slow with that core adjustment. And then instead of flinging the legs, we go slow. We go one at a time. There's nothing pushing into my feet, no sand. Feel where the block is touching into the low spaces of your back. Blanket or no blanket, you choose. If you feel some significant pull in your neck and you're noticing that it's not the best for you, you might try without the blanket and feel the structural support, even of the floor. Okay? As long as you don't have your chin pushing up. So the one reason we have the blanket is so that we don't end up with this chin up in this arch and actually ends up with some neck tension and sometimes a headache, right? So the blanket is good. Sometimes you have to take it away and go, oh, I missed that. And some of us don't use them. They don't work well. So we're going to feel the position of the hips, feel the legs close-ish, personal. Close-ish, a little bit of space, personal choice. And then the arms are forward and down, or they're out in cactus. Either one. There's benefits to both. Spend a few moments just feeling that gravitational reverse in the circulatory system. First, the feet get a little tingly and maybe cooler, blood pressure lowering. And just simply changing the influence internally, right? Gravity's constant pull of our forward folding. Right now we're opposite, letting our spine round. We're in the opposite experience of our daily habit. So even if we spent a class with more of these, right, we'd have quite a few benefits for our internal organs. So it actually relaxes the organs from gravity's constant pull. I don't know, you can ask your organs how they feel about it. Now, if your feet are separate, but a lot, right, you'll feel when you come out of it, it's a little challenging. So putting them close-ish. And then notice your breathing right now. Before you come down, notice the tug on your inhale. It goes against gravity right now. So you have to actually challenge your breathing when you're upside down for your lungs. You have to go against gravity to breathe. Okay, so the exhale is easier when your hips are up. It's longer, so it's a little more sedating. So as you bend your knees, you're going to lower it one at a time to the bolster. And then take a moment for a supported bridge, a full supported bridge. I want us to get to this today, a supported bridge. So I'm going to stretch both legs forward onto my bolster. This has an instant of, I don't know about this in my back usually. But it's so good for our hip flexors and our psoas, so our stomach muscles, because they're usually folding forward and dropping, right? The organs are prolapsing. So if it's a little harsh in your back, lower your block down. Or have no block and have your legs up on the bolster if it's really too much. But get a feel here now. If you're here and you can tolerate it right now, make sure that the knees are moving more internal versus rolling out. Okay? You could add a sandbag to the thigh lids. If it's really intense and you're feeling like I like it, but it's just too much, make sure the block is low and it's not right pushed on your tailbone. And then try to sand on across the thigh lids. Maybe you can do the higher height, but it hurts. Maybe you can accomplish it, but you have a real grimace in your face. Okay. Or behind it, you're really not feeling good about it. So the thigh lid has the sand, and my knees don't really rotate out as much. Okay, so a few seconds here. This is right before a deep hip stretch. So we want to feel the front of the thighs are balanced. We might have the arms beside us. They might be out to the side in a T. Sometimes just scanning the sensation that's offered in the pose is enough. Just let it process in the hips. I like this bridge pose because the feet are relaxed. They're not pushing down. You feel the hips lifted. Now consider this next motion. We're going to move into, get a little bit of hip momentum into a crossover. So we're going to slide the sand off, bring the feet in, knees up, push, move the block aside. And as you lower down, go gradual with your windshield wiper side to side. So this is a little slow, right? You're kind of motioning, so any of the tender spots in the back, kind of tenderizing those spaces. You're really trying to get the movement in the hips, side to side. So if you have one of those massage balls, this is a good one to roll on the ball, put it under your glute and massage that space. Otherwise, we go with windshield wipers. Okay, so I want you to notice here when we cross over, you have a blanket on the right, I'm pretty sure. So what I'm going to do is feel my knees flush right. Okay, then I'm going to take my left foot, kick the bolster over to the right side of my mat, and then feel the left leg on top of the bolster. Okay, now if that knee is a little bit up, I could force it down, but if it's up on its natural crossover position without influence, what I could do is put a blanket on top of the bolster. Doesn't have to be perfect shape or design. You just wad it up there so it works for your legs. So you don't want too much, you don't want too little, just the right amount. And then if you have a ball, you put that at the sacrum. If you have a block, use the block. Kind of the little pointy edge. I turn so the block is at its flat edge. If I use a block, place it to the sacrum. Okay, it's just an awareness. It's not going to be poking and causing a lot of balance. It causes direction. So we have the sand on the exterior left thigh, closer to the knee would be helpful. If you want to add more weight, if you have more bags of rice around or whatever, you can go find in your cupboard. Go get that. Place it on your hip when you come back. Okay, open the left arm and be interested in how this winds around the ribs into the spine and the thoracic vertebrae. The lower back is, the vertebrae is very chunky and thick, right? So they're not going to have as much momentum like your thoracics do because they each have a rib to connect to. They can be kind of undulating, right? That's what moves, not the lumbars. So we let the lumbar stay steady to help the hip. And then try to turn your head left. I like a blanket under my head for this one for sure. And then as I rotate in my waist, My left arm finds where it works best. Maybe bend it a little bit more down, maybe a little bit more out. Feel where you can like find ease, not necessarily forcing an extra amount. Feel where you already made it to the crossover. What's good about this? And relax the eyes. Yep, find the balance of the sand if it's there. Good. Dosing the oxygen right into the nose and then out of the mouth. Feel the true weight of the sand on the thigh. A few more moments. This would be one you want to do a good full minute, 2 minutes. You don't want to have less time in a crossover so your back can replenish, even if we do less poses, but more time on something like this. Now, if your sand is positioned right on the hip, like you have it really high, give it a feel a little bit lower. If it's already low enough on the exterior leg, it's probably the only choice you'd have would be to turn it. And you could turn it the other direction and just feel if that has something to it or if it's something you really don't like. It's good to feel the good, the bad, you know, just find what is the sources of support that work best for you. And then remove the block or ball. And let's come into a reclining thread the needle. So that would mean our left foot is going to go to the right knee. So we're going to roll on the back, left foot to right knee, draw the knees in and hold the back of the right thigh. Yeah, so be rather quick to respond so that now your back can release. There's no ball or block under the spine right now. And I guess you could have rolled back onto the ball. I think you could use the grippy ball under your sacrum on this. It's kind of challenging, but it's a nice massage on the sacrum. So when I pull on the back of that right thigh, I can hold the thigh, I can hold below the knee if my knee feels healthy to get something under it to hold. That's a deeper hip stretch if my hands are interlaced just below the knee. Yeah, enjoy getting these pretty thick muscles to have some momentum and blood flow through them right now. Stretch. Okay, now between sides, uncross, circle the knees, hold on to them, and find an easy sacrum rotation on the low back. Really circle the knees. Go both directions. And you might go slow or find a pretty good pace. Now, when we start going into the second side, keep the knees inwards. Monitor when you move the bolster. Now, if you have a blanket on top, it's probably something you have to put on after you get the bolster over to the other side. Unless you have major muscles. You can carry all awkward things together. All right, so second side, left leg down, right leg crosses. Feel the right arm open. Feel the weight of that leg move to the bolster on that over towards the left. And then add your props. Remember, the blocker ball comes first before the sandbag. So I place that. It's just an additional awareness into the sacrum. And then once you get kind of strong here to get your sand across the exterior thigh, feel that the sand, when it makes that flesh touch down, sometimes it really goes, it absorbs really fast and you don't necessarily feel traction. So try to get it into a place on the leg or turn the sand so that you feel even at 1% like there's possibility it's continuing to stretch the fibers. So when the right arm stretches open, We want to feel the significance of the upper chamber, and then the neck gently turns the head. Or does the head turn the neck? I think maybe the head turns the neck. The weight of the head turns the neck. I mean, the neck can get very tired because of the weight of our head. So use our reclining positions. All the rest of them are reclining, I think. Pretty sure. So all the rest are going to be neck relaxing. So let your arm on the right span open, and let your eyes rest and your arms feel an openness. You know, when you feel your chest wide, it's not a goal that we have in our hips, right? They're just positioned differently in proportion to our upper body. We have the heart in the middle, the lungs. So this stretching open of the arms is essential for wellness in our breathing. If we're hunched over all the time, we'll start to have some breathing difficulties, right? So feel a deep breath and feel that you're lifting. And noticing the back of the pelvis. The reason I want you to notice this area is that when we get our legs up the wall and have our bolster under the pelvis, that helps open up the breathing and makes more breathing room too. So this lower body, if it was up and you're taking a deep breath, you're going to get a little bit more O2 in. Okay? So, and actually the ribs are a little more open that way. So when we come into reclining, thread the needle, I want you to move your props away. Take the time, bolster supported for the last few seconds there. And then when I roll onto my back, I bring my right foot to left knee, knee open on the right leg. Left knee is in closed position, right? So when I hold the back of the left thigh, it's a closed circuit position. So I can hold under the knee. If you have any knee history on the knee that you're pulling, it's probably not the best thing if you've had any surgery or any even Fargo and you're pulling on the kneecap and trying to tighten that zone. So back of the leg works really good too. It's just dependent. Now the inner thigh on one side might be tighter than the other still. So when we move to our final destination, the emphasis is really to drain out and flush the legs. Flush yourself. Pretty rare that we get to experience that. So when you hold on the back of the left leg, however you've deemed the hold, let the body rock a little side to side. Rock a back body, side to side. And get the feel for your hip on the right leg. And now when we start to come into our final pose, I want you to find your way to that wall space, maybe with a few movements before you get to crawl to it. So you might uncross your right foot. You might do movements on your back, rocking side to side. You might find that you rock over to one side and you take a few seconds of cat-cow, maybe the hands, knees. Let your back move and mobilize between the vertebrae and the neck. And then arch the back. So feel a little bit of that motion. Not a lot, just small movements for your back muscles. Really try to get a feel of into the ribs and the back. Feel into the waist. Okay. So if you're going to go to the wall space, I recommend we do, okay? We're going to take our bolster to the base of the wall. If you're preferring not to do this, what you could do is you could place your bolster under your pelvis and put a chair under your calves. So you're still elevated, but instead of the wall, you're using a chair. right? So the bolster would be at the foot of the chair and the legs over the chair seat or the couch or the bed, whatever you have. The bed's kind of high for it, but it does work. So we're going to sit so that we're on the edge of the bolster. Be careful of the knees. Have a blanket, and then have a sandbag, okay? So you want to get your tush really close to the wall, and then when you let the legs basically swing up to the wall or the couch, okay, or the chair. It's kind of nice. At home you have a few more props to choose from, huh? All right, so when I have my seat, I try to get it close to the wall, but what I'm most interested in, because some of you might not be using a wall space, is that I'm on my bolster. That's the important part, okay? If your legs are on the wall, you can put the sand on the feet, and if not, you can put the sand on the shins, okay? But have a positional pattern so that you're able to refresh the legs and the feet, having some weight to drain down, right? The weight reference, the legs have that cascading kind of waterfall effect through the circulatory system. So feel the spine arch and then resting your organs from gravity's constant downward pull. So we feel the belly open, the ribs open. It's like you do a little scanning test. Is everything there, the right place? And then the arms are back or straight overhead, okay? You can even let your hands find the most relaxed place, open, at the hands so they're towards the ceiling turned. And then respond here for a few moments to your breath. If you have an eye pillow, place it over the eyes. No peeking, just let your eyes rest back into the skull and feel where the sensations of gravitational pull in the body. And if the sand doesn't serve you well, you can always go without it on your feet or your shins. You can still get enough out of the position with or without weight. Feel a little bit of exhale. And gradually lengthen your exhalation. If the diaphragm is really turned in a position so it's easier to exhale. So let the belly lift and lower. See if you can actually get the core of the body, the lower belly, to lift. And then feel when it actually lowers. So there's a squeezing position in the lower belly. Tailbone presses into the bolster. Everything stretches at the same moment. Processing the practice and your life, right? Your experience in your body, in your mind right now. And maybe you feel simply a little more quality of breath and concentration that you could move into your day with. It's generally a benefit, right, that you yield from a practice is concentration, flow in the body. And I let that concentration of awareness continue to flow and regenerate. If you have the sand on the feet, you'll carefully move your feet a little bit away from the wall. Bend your knees, bend your knees. Feel the legs move towards you. If you're on the couch or a chair with your legs, you don't really have to do this part of it, okay? You can pass on it. So those with sand are gonna move the sand off the feet And then feel if you can bring your feet into that Baddha Konasana, the cobbler's pose, one more time when they're elevated, right? So the knees are out, the feet are together, the hands push on the thighs, closer to the knee insides, right? So reversing that gravitational flow through the groin, so stimulating the flow of lymph, stimulating the immune system. So that's another reason to do our inversions too, immune system. Okay, now when we complete the positions, right, we move the knees in, we've kind of put the puzzle together, thighs, sense, and then roll to your side. And let your hands help bring you up to sitting. Take a few moments here, find a seated position. You can sit on the heels, you can cross the legs, an easy crossing, and let your hands rest in your lap. And select a motion of your shoulders back, your heart open. Yeah, and feeling that collective consciousness of all of us in practice. That your shoulders simply lift and roll back, shrugging them back and down. Hands lift up, bowing our brains down into the concentration in the heart. Surrender there. Inhale together. And with exhales, bowing into your heart. Namaste. Okay, thank you. Well, I hope that felt good. I don't know, huh? We'll find out.